We begin with a story that has kicked up a storm in Sri Lanka and threatens to snowball into a political controversy that could potentially fuel the great game unfolding in the Indian Ocean region. A U.S. State Department spokesperson tells WION Exclusive that Washington has no plans to set up a military base in Sri Lanka. This clarification comes as a shot in the arm for Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is being accused of realigning Sri Lanka's interests with that of the U.S. at the expense of China. Now, this is election year in Sri Lanka. The island nation will choose a new president before the end of this year. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is likely to run for president, is under fire from opposition lawmakers who accuse him of allowing the U.S. to expand its footprints on the island to counter China's influence in the wider Indian Ocean region. A U.S. State Department spokesperson tells WION Exclusive, and I quote, "We envision benefits to both the United States and Sri Lanka and to peace and security in the Indian Ocean region as a result of a strengthened defense relationship," unquote. The spokesperson says that the benefit of finalizing an updated Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, is that it will facilitate our ability to work together to support stability, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief and other shared priorities in the Indian Ocean region. Washington also reiterates that it does not plan to set up a military base in Sri Lanka. The spokesperson says that the U.S. has no ambitions to establish a U.S. military base or establish a permanent U.S. military presence in Sri Lanka. An updated VFA, if approved by the Sri Lankan government, would simply update an existing agreement established through an exchange of notes in the year 1995. Sri Lanka is negotiating a new military cooperation pact with the U.S. Replying to a question raised by a lawmaker belonging to the Communist Party, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe said that the Status of Forces Agreement was signed in 1995 by the then government of President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga. It establishes the framework for U.S. military personnel to operate in Sri Lanka. The other pact, known as the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, or ACSA, was signed by the then Defence Minister Gotabaya Rajapaksa in the year 2007. It was renewed in August 2017 without making changes to its contents. It extends diplomatic privileges to military personnel and defence contractors. Specifically, the text of the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, or ACSA, signed between Sri Lanka and the US, says that under Clause 3 of Article 3, all activities shall be carried out in accordance with their respective national laws. Also, Clause 4 of the said article prohibits the transfer of weapons systems. The opposition lawmakers in Sri Lanka fear that the military deals being negotiated with the U.S. would pave the way for an American base on the island. It has snowballed into a major political controversy, pitting Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, against his rivals ahead of the presidential elections to be held later this year. And we have our Associate Editor Ramesh Ramachandran joining us live from our newsroom. Ramesh, this is a complicated situation for Sri Lanka. Political turmoil continues to reign supreme through terror attacks in the country.
Indeed, Krishna, this is a significant development that affects not only Sri Lanka but Indian interests in the wider Indian Ocean region. Now, first, let's talk about the text of what the U.S. has said before we tackle the issue of putting this into context for our viewers. The spokesperson of the U.S. State Department has told WION Exclusive a couple of things. One, that the U.S. has no plans to set up a military base in Sri Lanka. That's number one. Second, that they call it the Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, and they say that this is only a sequel to the existing agreement between the US and Sri Lanka, and that both sides are renegotiating the text of this agreement. Number three, that this will accrue benefits to both the US and Sri Lanka for their shared priorities in the wider Indian Ocean. Now, the context of this all, Krishna, is that this is a political controversy brewing in Sri Lanka, with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe pitted against his opposition lawmakers who accuse him of siding with the US at the expense of China. Now, that is a manifestation of the great game being played out in the wider Indian Ocean region, which some countries call it the Indo-Pacific, extending from the Sea of Japan in the northeast to the southern and western Indian Ocean, which has of immense significance to India included. Now, the controversy is that after the attacks in Sri Lanka in April this year, the US has taken undue interest in investigating those attacks, and the fear among some opposition lawmakers and officials is that the US will expand its footprint on the island at the expense of its traditional allies such as China. Now, China is a big player in Sri Lanka today. They have a 99-year lease of Hambantota port. They're also involved in the Colombo Port City project. So they have investment projects across Sri Lanka, and that is of immense concern to the US and India included. Now, the question is, will Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe be able to tide over this crisis between now and later this year when elections are held for the post of president? And Ranil is also running for president likely against Maithripala Sirisena and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the brother of Mahinda Rajapaksa, who cannot contest this time because he's barred from contesting. But Gotabaya will likely run for president later this year. So this is a part of a political controversy playing out in Sri Lanka today.
Ramesh Ramachandran, our associate editor, joining us with the breakdown of the crisis that's brewing in Sri Lanka. Thank you, Ramesh, for being with us.